Hey there, let me ask you something real quick. Have you ever been in a situation where looking back, all the warning signs were there, but you just didn't see them? Or maybe you saw them, but you convinced yourself it wasn't that bad? I've been there. A lot of us have. And today I want to talk about something that doesn't get discussed nearly enough. We're going to dive deep into the patterns and behaviors that signal you're dealing with someone who might not be the right person for you, no matter how much you want them to be. This isn't about bashing anyone, it's about protecting yourself. It's about recognizing patterns early so you don't waste years of your life hoping someone will change. Because here's the brutal truth, you can't fix anyone, they have to want to fix themselves. And your job isn't to be someone's therapist or punching bag while they figure their life out. So stick with me here. What I'm about to share might save you months or even years of heartache. And if you're currently in a relationship, this might give you some clarity on what you've been feeling but couldn't quite put into words. Let's start with something that might seem obvious but is surprisingly easy to overlook when you're caught up in feelings. Have you ever noticed how some people are never wrong? I mean, genuinely never at fault for anything that happens in their life. Everything bad that happens to them is always someone else's doing. The job they lost, that was their boss being unfair. The friendships that ended, those people were jealous. The argument you just had, that was entirely your fault, even though you're pretty sure it started because of something she did. This pattern of never accepting responsibility is one of the most draining things you can experience in a relationship. And the tricky part is that in the beginning, you might even feel protective. You might think you're being a good partner by believing her side of every story, by validating her feelings, by reassuring her that yes, everyone else is the problem. But over time, something shifts. You start to realize that somehow you're always the one apologizing. You're always the one who did something wrong, even when you know deep down that isn't true. I remember talking to a friend about this exact situation. He told me about how his ex would turn every disagreement into a referendum on his character. If he forgot to text back within an hour, suddenly it became a whole thing about how he didn't care about her, how she's always the one putting in effort, how every other guy she dated did the same thing. Never mind that he was in a meeting, never mind that he had explained this beforehand, none of that mattered because in her world, she was the victim and he was just another person hurting her. And here's what makes this so toxic. You start to doubt yourself. You start to think maybe you are the problem. Maybe you are inconsiderate. Maybe you should try harder. So you do. You bend over backwards. You apologize for things you didn't do. You walk on eggshells, and guess what? It's never enough. Because the problem was never really about you. Now, let me be clear about something. Everyone goes through hard times. Everyone has moments where they genuinely are the victim of circumstances or other people's actions. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is a consistent, relentless pattern where accountability is non-existent, where every single thing that goes wrong is externalized. That's exhausting, and that's toxic. Moving on to something you might encounter right from the start. You know what's interesting? The way someone behaves in the early stages of dating tells you almost everything you need to know about how they'll behave in a relationship. And one of the clearest red flags is when someone treats connection like a chess match. What do I mean by that? I'm talking about the deliberate games people play, the calculated waiting before responding to messages, the hot and cold behavior where one day you're the most important person in the world and the next day you're ignored, the testing where they do things specifically to see how you'll react, the weird power dynamics where everything feels like a negotiation. Here's the thing about games. They come from a place of deep insecurity. When someone is playing games with you, what they're really saying is that they don't believe their authentic self is enough to keep your interest. They think they need to manipulate your emotions to make you chase them. They think relationships are about winning and losing rather than partnership. And sure, maybe there's some outdated dating advice out there that tells people to play hard to get or whatever, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about deliberate emotional manipulation. I'm talking about someone who makes you feel uncertain about where you stand because they think that uncertainty will make you more invested. Let me paint a picture. Imagine you're talking to someone new, the conversation is great. You're texting back and forth, everything feels natural. Then suddenly, radio silence. You don't hear from them for 3 days, then they pop back up like nothing happened with some vague excuse or no explanation at all. You're relieved because you actually like this person, so you continue the conversation, things are great again. Then it happens again and again. Before you know it, you're the one constantly checking your phone, constantly wondering what you did wrong, constantly trying to figure out the right thing to say to keep their interest. That's a game, and it's not cute, it's not mysterious, it's manipulative. And if that's how things start, imagine how they'll be when actual challenges come up in the relationship. If someone can't communicate directly and honestly about their interest level before you're even dating, how will they communicate about finances or conflict or future plans? The healthiest relationships start with clarity. They start with two people who are genuinely interested in each other and aren't afraid to show it. Sure, there's something to be said for not being overly available or losing yourself in a new connection, but there's a massive difference between having your own life and deliberately playing with someone's emotions. Now, here's something that might not be obvious at first, but becomes a massive issue over time. Think about what happens when something good happens in your life. Maybe you got a promotion at work. Maybe you achieved a personal goal you've been working toward. Maybe you accomplished something you're really proud of. What's the first thing you want to do? Probably share it with the people you care about, right? Now imagine sharing that good news with your partner, and instead of excitement or pride or celebration, you're met with indifference. Or worse, you're met with negativity. Suddenly your achievement is being minimized, or she's upset because something similar hasn't happened for her. Or she finds a way to turn the conversation back to herself and something she's struggling with. This is what happens when achievement becomes competition. Instead of being your biggest cheerleader, she becomes your rival. Instead of your successes being celebrated as shared wins for the relationship, they become threats. And this creates such a twisted dynamic because you start to feel guilty about good things happening to you. You start to downplay your achievements. You might even start to hide them altogether because you know the reaction you're going to get. Healthy relationships have room for both people to grow and succeed. In fact, the best relationships are ones where both people actively support each other's growth, where your partner's success makes you proud, not insecure, where you genuinely want the best for each other, even if you're at different stages in your own journeys. I think about this in terms of what a true partnership looks like. If you're building a life with someone, their wins are your wins. If they get a better job, that's good for both of you. If they achieve something they've been working toward, that reflects positively on the relationship because you've been supporting each other through the process. But when someone is so insecure that they can't handle you doing well, that tells you they're not thinking about the relationship as a team. They're thinking about it as a competition where only one person can win, and that competitive energy bleeds into everything. Maybe you can't talk about your friends without her getting weird about it. Maybe you can't mention a hobby you enjoy without her making it about how you don't spend enough time with her. Maybe you can't even have a good day without her finding a way to bring the mood down. That's not a partnership, that's emotional imprisonment. Speaking of which, let's talk about jealousy. Now, I want to be really clear about this because jealousy is a normal human emotion. Everyone feels it sometimes. But there's a world of difference between occasionally feeling a twinge of jealousy and letting that jealousy control your behavior and poison your relationship. Healthy jealousy might look like feeling a little weird when your partner mentions someone they find attractive, but then recognizing that feeling, not acting on it, and letting it pass. Toxic jealousy looks like interrogating your partner about every person they interact with. It looks like going through their phone without permission. It looks like making accusations based on nothing but your own insecurity. It looks like getting upset when they want to spend time with friends or family without you. And here's where it connects to that competitive mindset we just talked about. Toxic jealousy often stems from the belief that you're in competition with everyone else in your partner's life. Their friends are competition. Their coworkers are competition. Anyone they follow on social media is competition. And that creates this suffocating environment where you feel like you're constantly being monitored and judged. I knew someone once who told me his girlfriend would get upset if he mentioned any story that involved another woman, even in passing. Didn't matter if it was a coworker, a friend's girlfriend, a family member. If a woman existed in a story he was telling, she would fixate on that detail and ignore everything else. He started censoring his own stories, editing out people, changing pronouns, just to avoid the inevitable fight. Think about how exhausting that is. Think about how much energy that takes. And for what? Because she couldn't trust him despite him never giving her a reason not to. That's the key thing about toxic jealousy. It's not based on anything you did. It's based on their own internal fears and insecurities. And no amount of reassurance will fix it because the problem isn't you. The problem is their relationship with themselves, which brings me to something closely related: control. When someone is deeply insecure and jealous, they often try to control their partner as a way of managing their anxiety. And control can look like a lot of different things. Sometimes it's obvious, like telling you who you can and can't hang out with. Sometimes it's more subtle, like making you feel guilty anytime you do something without them. Control is about power. It's about someone needing to manage every aspect of the relationship because they're terrified that if they loosen their grip even slightly, they'll lose you. And again, this might seem flattering at first. It might feel like they just really care about you, like they just want to be close to you. But over time, you realize it's not about love. It's about ownership. Real love trusts. Real love gives freedom. Real love doesn't need to micromanage every aspect of your life to feel secure. When someone truly loves you in a healthy way, they want you to have your own friends, your own hobbies, your own life outside of the relationship. They trust that at the end of the day, you choose to be with them. They don't need to force it. But controlling behavior says the opposite. It says, I don't trust you. It says, I don't believe you'll choose me unless I make it impossible for you to choose anything else. And that creates a prison, not a relationship. Think about the little things that add up. Maybe she needs to know where you are at all times. Maybe she gets upset if you make plans without checking with her first. Maybe she wants access to all your passwords and devices. Maybe she monitors how much time you spend doing things that don't involve her. Maybe she makes decisions for you without asking because she's decided she knows what's best. These patterns are about removing your autonomy. And when you lose your autonomy in a relationship, you lose yourself. You stop being an individual person with your own thoughts, feelings, and desires. You become an extension of someone else. And that's one of the loneliest feelings in the world, being in a relationship but losing who you are. Now let's talk about something that's become increasingly relevant in modern dating, the transactional approach. And I'm going to be direct here. If someone is only interested in you because of what you can provide materially, that's not a relationship. That's a business arrangement. And you deserve better than that. Look, there's nothing wrong with wanting a partner who is financially stable. There's nothing wrong with appreciating when someone treats you to dinner or buys you something thoughtful. But there's a big difference between appreciating generosity and demanding it as the price of admission. If someone is only responsive when you're spending money on them, that tells you everything you need to know. If the quality of your conversation directly correlates with the cost of your last date, that's a problem. If you feel like you're constantly being tested to prove your worth through your wallet, you're not in a relationship, you're being used. And this can be subtle. It doesn't always look like someone asking for luxury items on the first date, though that certainly happens. Sometimes it looks like someone who always happens to need help with bills. Someone who always has some financial crisis that you feel obligated to solve. Someone who keeps track of what you spend on them and throws it in your face during arguments. Someone who measures your love by your bank account. This ties into those earlier points about accountability and manipulation, because often the same person who is using you financially will also make you feel guilty if you set boundaries around money. They'll make you feel cheap or ungenerous or like you don't really care about them. They'll compare you to other people who did more for them. They'll make you feel like you're failing as a partner because you won't bankrupt yourself to prove your love. And here's what's insidious about this. If you do keep giving, if you do keep spending, if you do keep trying to buy their affection, it never actually brings you closer because the foundation is wrong. You can't buy genuine love. You can't purchase real connection. All you're doing is training someone to see you as a resource rather than a person. I want to pause here and address something important. Everything I've talked about today, all these patterns and behaviors, they come from somewhere. Usually from hurt, from trauma, from learned behaviors, from deep insecurity. And that's sad. It genuinely is. Nobody wakes up and decides to be toxic. These patterns develop over time, often as coping mechanisms for pain. But here's what you need to understand. That explanation doesn't make it your responsibility to fix. You can have compassion for why someone behaves the way they do while still recognizing that you can't stay in a situation that's harming you. Their healing journey is their own. And while it's beautiful to support a partner through growth, there's a difference between supporting someone who is actively working on themselves and sacrificing yourself for someone who isn't willing to change. Change is possible. People can grow. People can heal. But they have to want to. They have to recognize the patterns. They have to take accountability. They have to put in the work. And you can't do that for them. You can't love someone into healing. You can't sacrifice yourself into making someone better. So what do you do if you recognize these patterns in your relationship? First, trust yourself. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't let anyone convince you that your feelings aren't valid or that you're overreacting. Your intuition is usually right. Second, set boundaries. Clear, firm boundaries and stick to them. See how the person responds. Do they respect your boundaries? Do they try to understand your perspective, or do they fight you on it, manipulate you, make you feel bad for having needs? Third, don't be afraid to walk away. I know that's easier said than done, especially if you've invested time and emotion into the relationship. But staying in something toxic out of fear of being alone or because you've already invested so much is just going to cost you more in the long run. Your time, your energy, your mental health, they're all valuable. Don't waste them on someone who doesn't appreciate them. And finally, work on yourself. Not because any of this is your fault, but because the healthier you are, the better you'll be at recognizing these patterns early. The more you value yourself, the less willing you'll be to accept treatment that doesn't match your worth. The more secure you are, the less likely you are to be drawn to people who thrive on creating chaos. At the end of the day, relationships should add to your life, not drain it. They should make you feel more like yourself, not less. They should be built on mutual respect, trust, support, and genuine care. And when those elements are missing, when you're constantly walking on eggshells, constantly apologizing, constantly trying to prove yourself, constantly feeling like you're not enough, that's not love, that's survival. And you deserve so much more than that. So pay attention to the patterns. Trust your gut, set your boundaries, and don't be afraid to choose yourself, because the right person won't make you choose. They'll choose you too. And together, you'll build something healthy, something genuine, something that brings out the best in both of you. That's what you're waiting for. And that's what you deserve.